Hi, in this video we're going to analyze the situation and see what is likely to happen to the United States in 2020 with the coronavirus disease pandemic, from a social order and a healthcare perspective. I am not going to cover the ensuing economic meltdown today because that's a topic I will cover maybe in a dedicated video. If you're interested in that topic as well, I would suggest that you subscribe to my channel after watching the current video if you liked my analysis. Now, South Korea and China have proven that with a government that takes the problem seriously, either by acting proactively or with extremely heavy-handed containment and scaling measures, in addition to extremely fast and pervasive testing of the population, it is possible to virtually halt the spread of the SARS coronavirus Mark II, and therefore reduce the impact of the COVID-19, the 2019 coronavirus disease. China in particular stands out. They were the ground zero and they had a late start to act on this, but they still managed to contain it. Being an omnipotent totalitarian state that makes George Orwell's 1984 sounds like Disneyland, no other country has this much control over its citizens and the flow of information, and no other country is able to scale its infrastructure so quickly. China, for instance, was able to build a brand new hospital with 1,000 beds and 30 intensive care units in only 10 days. And you know what they did after that? They built a second one, just as fast. Throughout the outbreak, the Orwellian Chinese government was able to track every infected person through their cell phones, their social networks and affiliations, and they were able to entirely lock down cities that were more populous than many countries in the world. And they were literally dragging potentially infected citizens by force out of their homes and confining the others by arc welding their doors so they couldn't even get out of their homes. Even with all these factors, China was only able to limit the mortality rate to 4%, and it took 2 months of draconian measures to stop the spread. What will happen when they lift the lockdown is another question entirely. We'll see what happens then. Italy, on the other hand, and an increasing number of European countries that were caught by surprise without the ability to scale like China, are proving that the mortality rate of this disease is much higher in practice. So far, Italy has not yet managed to contain the virus, and their mortality rate is, at the time I'm posting this video, above 8.5%. They have so many dead that the crematoriums running 24/7 can't keep up with the demand, and they had to call in the army to evacuate at least 15 trucks of dead bodies at once. Italy seems to have had at least curved the exponential spread towards what looks more like a linear growth, but it's a little bit early to tell. The thing is, unless you do like the South Koreans or the Chinese to not only flatten the curve but also aggressively scale your testing and treatment, every country is going to face the same exponential curve. This is a chart I have made from publicly available data, cross-checked with multiple sources such as the World Health Organization, the Johns Hopkins University, Wikipedia, and, well, others. This chart shows the number of infections. As you can see, almost every country follows the same exponential curve. It's just a matter of how many days of delay they start with. Now, if you thought the situation in Europe is bad, wait until you see what happens to the United States of America within the next few weeks. I'm ready to bet you a Big Mac with fries that it's going to be the biggest mess on the planet, with contagion, mortality, and chaos never seen before. But not just because of the disease. Now, why is that, you ask? Why would it be different than Europe? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. We will talk a bit about the healthcare system, economics, and then the most interesting part, social factors that are unique to the United States. As of January 31st, 2020, according to the American Hospital Association, the US had a total of 6,146 hospitals, providing a little bit under 1 million staffed beds, of which only a tiny fraction, 5 to 13%, are intensive care beds. The figure varies between 45,000 and 55,000 ICU beds depending on who you ask, and if you ask me, to be extremely generous, I could include all the types of intensive care and say 100,000 ICU beds, which brings us to roughly 13%. Following the current spread patterns, the ICU bed capacity will be exceeded within 2 to 4 weeks. But let's be even nicer and assume the unrealistic scenario where all the hospital beds can be emptied and requisitioned for intensive care for this pandemic. Let's say you can just throw out all the people who are already in the hospitals for the seasonal flu or for some other medical condition. Let's also assume that you have unlimited ventilators for COVID-19 patients to be able to breathe. Well, since the spread of the virus is exponential, or at least follows a power law, unless some really draconian measures are taken, you're still looking at 1 million infections within a month or two. Not everybody goes to the hospital, but wait a few days or weeks more and you have 3 to 5 million people infected, and then bam, treatment capacity exceeded. But again, this is assuming you can requisition all the hospital beds, not just the intensive care ones. If you limit yourself to intensive care units, forget about it. You have a few weeks at most. Now, in most countries other than the United States, this pandemic is simply two things: a testing problem and a capacity problem, where you have to flatten the contagion curve, or should I say curves, to make sure you don't exceed the treatment capacity of hospitals. Both in Italy and in China, subregions with overwhelmed capacity had the high mortality rates we are seeing, whereas subregions that had few cases had low mortality rates. Deaths are driven by overwhelmed health systems. Considering that the current US administration not only had disbanded the pandemic response teams built in previous years, but also ignored and minimized the pandemic until it was too late, preferring to create a false sense of security and to keep pumping money into Wall Street to try to keep the stock market alive, which had no significant impact whatsoever, the US government and healthcare system is incredibly ill prepared to face this public health crisis. Too little, too late. Now let's take another look at my chart here. China and South Korea have managed to flatten the curve and virtually stop the spread for now. That is, if you trust China on their reported numbers. Iran, the emerald green line, has what looks like a linear growth rate, but I'm not sure I can trust the numbers provided by their government, so let's not comment on that one. Now, since the temporal delay was so big between China and the rest of the world, and China is such a special case, let's exclude that one from the dataset for a minute and zoom into the rest of the most affected countries to see the trends more clearly. As you can see, Italy went exponential and are struggling to flatten it, but it seems, just by looking at the curve with the naked eye, that the trend there is becoming linear instead of exponential, if they can keep it up. Spain and Germany are following the same kind of curve as Italy had in the beginning, and it remains to be seen if they can flatten it. But here comes the big one. Look at that lime green curve. This is the United States. Here we can see its spread rate is much steeper. It's worse than China, worse than Spain and Germany, and worse than Italy. I expect the US numbers to go through the roof in the coming days, with the line going nearly vertical. And that's just with the reported cases. The case numbers from the US are vastly underreported and underestimated for a couple of reasons. First, because the US, they've been doing almost no testing until recently, And secondly, because most people are still in the incubation period. The charts I'm showing on screen here are going to be outdated within a day or two of publishing the video, of course. So I'll leave a link in the description down below so that you can find them on my personal website, as well as links to other resources. I'll try to keep it updated every day or so. I expect the US is going to look very unique on my chart in a couple of days. The problem here is not the quality of the healthcare available in the United States. Many Americans, particularly the rich ones, frequently boast about how their healthcare and pharmaceutical industries are the most advanced in the world, that they have the best quality of care, and so on and so forth. Well, maybe. But quality is not the problem. The problem is that the United States healthcare system is not a healthcare system. It's a health business. It serves the rich, it preys on the middle class, and it leaves the poor to die or remain in a state of perpetual poverty. Ruled by the private health insurance industry, it is designed to be as complicated and predatory as possible. Now, if you are not a United States resident, you might have some trouble grasping this, so let me take a minute to give you some concrete examples. In the US, a short hospital stay can cost you anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 US dollars and more. Childbirth usually costs between $10,000 and $30,000. A single ambulance ride is between $2,000 and $3,000 US dollars. You know, some years ago, a lady in Boston got her leg stuck between train platforms. She had an open fracture, and yet she literally begged the people around her to not call the ambulance because she couldn't afford it. A friend of mine had his child in intensive care for 3 months last year. Can you guess how much the hospital billed for it?
$1 million.
Don't you think we should maybe ask for more than $1 million? $1 million isn't exactly a lot of money these days.
Well, the amount the hospital billed for it was actually 3.7 million US dollars. 3.7 million! That's many times the amount of money the average US worker will make in their entire lifetime. In the United States, if you don't have extraordinary health insurance provided by your employer, you're as good as dead. And guess what happens when you lose your job, as many people are experiencing in emergency situations like this pandemic? You're no longer covered. And even if you were to find a new job tomorrow with good health insurance, you will typically have to wait at least 3 to 6 months before the insurance actually covers you. And even then, it will probably not cover your pre-existing conditions that occurred during the terms of your previous insurance. So the irony here is that while the US is the country where it is socially encouraged to change jobs to further your own career, doing so can compromise your healthcare, which means many people remain chained to their existing jobs for life because of that. With the healthcare system being what it is, and wage earners facing deteriorating job security, the safety nets in American society are virtually non-existent. The Trump administration wants to give every American a $1,000 check. Come on, don't make me laugh. Not only will affected people have to cover for months of unemployment, $1,000 barely gets you 2 hours in a hospital in the USA. This just points to a bigger problem. The United States government is weak. It has weakened in every area except the military, and it improvises quick fixes and band-aids instead of tackling problems that are the root causes in the first place. In the last few days, there have been so many job losses that people trying to apply for unemployment benefits have been causing the servers to crash. And when those people don't have a job and are told to stay inside, they don't spend. And when they don't spend, other people eventually lose their jobs. Bam, 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 domino effect kicks in. Now, for many Americans without exceptional health insurance paid by their employer, if the new SARS coronavirus is unkind to them, it can pretty much mean go bankrupt or die. Neither proposition is a good future for those people, nor for the country. I will let you guess what happens when people start undergoing personal bankruptcies one after another, have to foreclose their homes, or dig deeper into debt. And all of that was just the healthcare and economic aspect of the problem that I had to cover first. Now let's look at the social aspect, which is where it gets really interesting. The United States is a uniquely individualistic, divided, and hard to govern country, for reasons that go all the way back to the American Revolution nearly 3 centuries ago. Self-reliance and distrust in government and authorities are deeply rooted concepts in the American mindset, whether consciously or not, in a way that is not seen elsewhere in the world. Some of the manifestations of this distrust, besides the staggering rates of gun ownership, is the significant presence of anti-state right-wing libertarians, religious cults, anti-vaxxers, and so on. There is a culture of fear in America, and many are preying on the American public to cultivate this fear for their own gain. It is also reflected in the free market nature of American society, including healthcare. It's hard to control and coordinate your 6,000 hospitals when they are all independent enterprises doing their own thing. Individually, these aspects of American society just seem like curiosities, But in the time of a public health crisis like a pandemic, not only do they make the government job significantly more complicated, they also combine to create a very, very explosive mix from a social perspective. What do you think happens in a country where money means security, when people are losing their jobs in droves, and where there are 20% more firearms than people, and people are scared of each other? Yeah, you guessed it. The United States is a powder keg, the biggest, richest, most militarized and hard to control powder keg you've ever seen. And while empires have come and gone multiple times in the history of humanity, the page of history that we see being written right now is completely unprecedented in scale. It's hard to predict what will be the outcome of all this, but what we can assume is that a significant amount of social chaos is likely to occur in American society in the coming months and years. For my many friends in America who may be watching this, I'm sorry that you will have to go through this. So yeah, that's what I had to say today. That was a lot. Thank you for watching my video. If you liked my analysis, give it a thumbs up and please share it with your friends and family. In my next videos, I will talk about job opportunities as well as my analysis of the economic recession or even depression that we are entering. The coronavirus will be the trigger, but it is not the cause. The cause is rooted much deeper in the way the US economy has been managed for the last few decades. I will present the result of those observations and research I've made for the last couple of years. So if you would like to learn more, hit the subscribe button and then click the notification bell if you want to be sure you don't miss it. Because I don't publish very often on my channel, so if you don't click the notification bell, it's quite likely you're going to miss it amidst the flurry of content being posted by the other channels every day. Until next time, I wish you the best of luck. Take care.